Welcome everybody back to the Spitter Rack. I know we've been away for a little while, but hey, we're back with a great show. Today we're going to be talking about The Old Guard. And the reason we're talking about The Old Guard, the comic by Greg Rucka, is because they're coming out with a new movie soon by Netflix. And it's going to be starring our girl, Charlize Theron. Now, right now, we think it was important for us to take a look at some of what developed, what the comic book was, and how it develops into the movie. Of course, we'll talk about the movie when it comes up, but right now, what was the genesis, the start of it? So I'm going to start off. Petey, do you want to start off and kick off and explain a little bit of what the basis of this whole comic is about?
Well, ultimately, we're going to try not to spoil everything. So with that being said, the story starts off with on a mission where we get to see some of the characters, and they're obviously these great mercenaries. So that's basically, you see how the characters sort of and we get there's like 5 of them, and to just give you a quick overview of it when you go into this book. It's but wait a second, before I go there, we got to go into The Old Guard, which has been titled, the first miniseries called The Opening Fire. It's done by Greg Rucka, Alejandro Fernandez. The color is the artist, colors by Daniela Miwa, and letters by Jody Wynn. So yes. This is it was a 5-issue miniseries, and then they had a sequel, second mini that came after that. But this one had this high contrast sort of art by Leandro Fernandez. So you got this sort of book, is a lot of action, a lot of like cool stuff happening, but then hints of the past. So it's one of the things that the movie could do. I mean, I think there's enough plot to do this story, but at the same time, you could do sort of this. You could add some more. You could go to doing flashbacks, stuff like that. But you introduce to Andy, who's one of the characters, and she kind of is having a one night stand. But basically, this story is going to introduce you to, and it says the opening of it. It's a fairy tale of bullets, of blood and bullets. It's a story of 2 women, 3 men who cannot die. Mostly, their names are Andy, Nick, Joe, Booker, and Niall. It's a story about time, age, and ages, and about their friendship, love, and regret. So that sort of gives you that these guys are immortal. That's like the opening thing, like you'd open up the side of a book to get your foreword. And this one sort of gives you that. But it starts with them, a lot of action, her going to this thing where someone sort of hires her. She's you can see that she's going through a lot of stuff. And then that leads into the plot. So what do you need? What do you first say what we thought of this thing? Did you like it? Because I reviewed it once.
Yeah, and so I got to say, when I first looked at it, I was like, oh, this art, the color and the art is just going to throw me off completely. But you know what? The color by Miwa, Daniela Miwa, was very interesting. I mean, it set moods to the entire comic, and I really appreciated that. I mean, especially when you have, the art. The art was, I got to say, pretty interesting. I mean, excellent in that, you were sometimes just showing silhouettes of the character, not always like the straight up visuals of the character. And then you see a lot of shading and stuff, and the coloring just helped it out. I mean, I was after really going through it, I was really impressed with it. But what's pretty interesting too, we have the main character, Andy, or Andromaca, I believe is her name. She's 3,000 or something odd years old, and she's been alive.
Well, they don't know. We don't know how old she is. They kind of think that she's the oldest, but
right, she's the eldest, and so she's the one who's lived the longest. And one of the things that they do is they're others, and they always seem to have dreams of one another, and that's how they're able to connect finally with one another. And this is how they discover the latest one, who's Niall Freeman, I believe her name is, and she's a soldier in Afghanistan who dies and comes back, basically, and they're able to connect and reach out to her, basically, and bring her into the fold of the family. Like Petey said, these guys are mercenaries. They've been around for a long time. They've been doing a lot of things. They have a lot of history. One of the characters is from he came back again after the Napoleonic War. 2 of the other characters, I think it's Joe and Nick, those 2 were part of the Crusades. They fought each other, they battled each other, and they came back. And now they're very, very close.
Well, let's go before we go. there's a romance that's which I joked about in our other review, where excuse me, Andy meets up with her husband, who's out in Australia, who was he was a slave, but it was a slave that was purchased in the West Indies, and then they made their way to Britain and to Australia.
Yeah, well, he made his way. He was in Britain. He was a slave who was from the West Indies, who was
Just
brought
remember
to the
that they
Americas.
got the slave in the West Indies. I just want to
Right, and they brought him, and they
yes.
brought him to the States.
Yes.
And he rebelled during the American Revolution because the
Uh-huh.
British promised them freedom. But then when he went to England, he was basically living in poverty. Went to jail, and then he was sent to Australia, the penal colony. So,
Yeah.
and that's where he ends up meeting her, and she falls in love with him. You know, and she's had, and that's one of the few people she remembers, because one of the things when you're immortal or long lived as they are is that you connect with people, but after a while, and this is probably one of the key stories, is that, you know, how do you connect with people that you can always outlive, always outlast, you know? And it's pretty sad, because with her, she can't remember everybody she's been with, or remember those like her mother or father or her families, you know. And she tells something to Niall later on in the future when they meet up, where they're like, "Hey, remember to keep those photographs, because, you know, you will at least be able to see who you were connected to, who your family was, as opposed to me, where back then they didn't have that." So it's pretty interesting, you know, that with immortality, you always have that duality where, oh, everybody's like, oh, you can live forever, you can do, but after a while, doing it by yourself doesn't really matter. And even Andy goes through some big losses, but she also, you know, they're trying to numb the pain, does a whole bunch of different things to forget and to numb the pain because of what she's going through. All of the old guard go through that. All of them experience that same issue, you know, to some degree.
Well, one of the things that they say is that your family would come to hate you or something like that and do terrible things. And basically the idea that you get to have to go through different illnesses, see your kids pass. Though I want to say that they did sort of do that in the X-Men The Hidden Years, the character who was long-lived. And she goes back, because the X-Men always has like characters from the past or the future coming back, like Cable. But he's at some point he's talking to Cyclops like that's his father, when it's like he'd be too old to care. But they had this moment in The Hidden Years where this girl, this blonde, decides to leave this long-lived mutants that have been sleeping through time, trying to get to a different, better point in history. And she decided she wanted to see her kid, and she's going there. She sees him and says, "Oh, you want my dad?" And the dad is old and is like, "What the hell? He's all like, how can you come here after all this time you left us?" So that was sort of the idea of what was there. But it's interesting because Greg Rucka, he had and I don't think there's much else. What else do you think we can get into this? That would not be a spoiler. We have to do this be a part one until after the movie comes out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think necessarily the movie's going to follow everything directly. As we've seen in the past, they've constantly changed things up because people who've read the comic basically know the outline of what's going to happen. But I mean, one of the things I think is just focusing on the themes, like you started before. You know, the focusing on family. What does immortality mean, and what does it mean to others? You know, because the key thing here is that, you know, probably the biggest story coming out of this is that you have someone who wants to get immortality, and what does it cost to try and get that? You know, trying to understand what it is. As you find out in the story.
Hold on for a second. Keep that in mind. Sorry. Start that idea again. The immortality.
What is it more? You know, the thing is that we all want to achieve immortality, right? And, you know, what are we going to do to try to achieve it? But they don't even understand why they have this or what's going on, and they find out later. And you'll see, I don't know, can I reveal this? But they find out later that they can't. Okay. So
we want them to be, because these things are surprises, not the immortality, but some of the things that go on here. Oh, hold on.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm saying.
Sorry.
And then how do you share immortality? I mean, can you share? And it basically comes down to what I think in this story that you get is that, you know, you can only connect with those that you have a mutual feeling for, you know. And this is a common theme that you have even in vampire stories, where you have the long-lived vampire who knows he's going to outlive his love unless she becomes a vampire or or he vice versa. Or you also have the same thing in this, and I'm gonna call it the Highlander series from the '80s. You know, the Clan McGregor, the Clan is it Clan McGregor?
You mean Sean Connery?
No, I'm talking the clowns.
Okay.
You know, so where they have to live through, and they've lived many lives and had many loves, but they have to leave them if they go by. And you can tell that in like the series, they had the main character Duncan MacLeod, not Clan MacLeod. He has his girlfriend, and he's growing. He's getting, he's continuing to grow, but she's getting older from when he first met her.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you continue to have that relationship as time goes by?
Mm-hmm.
You have to finally admit sometimes that even though you guys love each other, it can't. And it also presents itself here, even in the relationship that Andy has. But it also turns for some of them, like one of the characters, Booker, who's important in the story. It changes how his family is towards him. Because if you see somebody who's young and continues to be young and vibrant, you want to also have that. And how do you deal with that?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a classic dilemma. Nothing is given without, what do they always say? Nothing is given without a price, right? And the price of immortality is your reduced connection with those that you love or those you connect with. And as time goes on, how do you connect? I mean, it's like, I know some guys are going to say it doesn't matter, but it's like you're a guy and you're a certain age and then you start dating a younger person. A lot of times you're never going to be able to connect with them because they don't have the same ideas, but you can always do. You can always hook up with somebody who finally, you guys have similar likes, similar desires. But the reality is the vast majority won't, because you're like, oh, damn, they don't know what Pac-Man is. They're just too young. They don't know what, Motown is, because, they're just too young. Something along those lines.
The next thing we'll say is Greg Rucka also did a story called Whiteout, which was sort of like it was a murder mystery in like Alaska or at some sort of ice station, like the way The Thing was. Remember the movie The Thing? Do you remember Whiteout or The Thing?
Okay. Well, you're bringing in stuff that I thought we were just talking about just this.
I'm talking about Greg Rucka.
Okay. I didn't read any of those things before, so.
Okay. So there's a movie called Whiteout that had Kate Beckinsale that was done in a winter, like a frigid setting. So it's one of those things where you see his properties have already been sent to Hollywood. And this one, being similar to Highlander, is one of the things that sort of could, like, Hollywood look at and say, yeah, it's, Whiteout did kind of good. Let's see, it did okay. Let's see what this is like. We can get some things in there. We got some nice high action you see from the trailer. And that's what ultimately they push it. So we'll see how far they push it in this one, because when these immortal people, this is the closest to, that I've seen outside of Mr. Immortal and the Great Lakes Avengers. Like, they really pushing it, being able to kill these guys and them coming back from it.
Yeah, but as Netflix, for the movie, they're just doing a movie. They're not doing a series, right? I mean, that's my impression.
It's a movie right now, but who knows? Movies are made to be made into sequels.
Right.
Who knows how many? The thing is, like, they have that happening. I think this property, if you asked me, it lends itself more to a series than a movie.
Yeah. Because there's so much more there. There's just so much more to delve into. But I don't know if they wanted to redo the whole Highlander thing again. I know I keep bringing it up, but I think that's probably one of the best comparisons around. Of course, if you guys disagree, please put it down in the comments below and tell us what you think is the best, best similar thing to it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that what are you going to do in terms of this project, in terms of a longer term thing? But I think bringing Charlize Theron will make a huge difference. She's a known quantity, and I think she's going to do a good job. In terms of the comic, you have Greg Rucka, who's a award-winning Eisner winner, who for Whiteout, for example. And I do remember the movie Whiteout with Kate Beckinsale. I'm sorry, just
blow
brain freeze,
momentum.
That was like 10 years ago. So
like, what is this? What is this Whiteout you speak of? And the next, now I remember.
10 years ago. So come on, you clearly don't remember that. It was a small movie. Right, but yeah, when I jot, it's like Kate Beckinsale. Yeah, that's right. But look, I think it's you're right. This has been made into he's clearly a director. He's clearly a writer that Hollywood is looking at and saying, hey, there's products that he may have that they can push. And this comic book clearly has a pretty good story, beginning, middle, and end.
Well, I would say, far as the comic book for me, it needed something else.
Oh boy,
It
let's
did
start
have
getting into
a
this.
twist
A
in it.
knife fight.
It did have a twist in it. It had, the opening, the action, the settings of the things. I think I joked, we reviewed issue 4, and I joked that Django was in it. That sort of thing. I talked about that earlier. And but that's the thing. Outside of they talking about Napoleon and the Germans attacking Russia and being obviously froze out by coming because they went too far and deep into Russia to survive. So one of the things, it'd be interesting because a lot of these properties have the past and going to flashbacks, trying to figure a way that the flashback works out into the end of the story. Because in this one, it just sort of ends to get to the next story because they solve it. Because there's this one guy who's like a villain. He's like a big deal villain, and he had the moment I disliked where he kind of is stabbing them. And they're just pincushions. They're just pincushions. And I was just like, I don't know about that, but it really bugged me when I read it. But I think it needed something, a bigger tie-in, so you have these flashbacks so you can connect with the past, something like that. This is basically, almost like the 2-act thing. It wasn't actually a 2-act thing, but it's just basically like, hey, they're doing this stuff. There's a plot point 1 that sort of throws them into the action. Then there's the twist, then there's another twist, right? And the next thing you're like, then it just ends. And I felt like they just had one other thing to while this was happening, but then of course they played up the immortality part, saying, "Okay, you're away for this amount of time, and then we'll see you at that point." So, that's the only thing I'll say as far as the story. But otherwise, I mean, it's for an Image comic. It's a very developed, very well placed, and the location, the writing of these sort of settings is very strong. So, it'll be an interesting read.
Yeah, and I gotta agree with you. I agree with you, PD. With it does have like a particular. I see what you're saying, that there could have been something added there too. But I also felt that it was just, this was a setup for a new story going forward. They didn't want to give us too much didn't want to reveal too much. But for this contain, I thought it was good in and of itself.
Because that's the thing. If you look at like the first Hellboy movie, they start with a human guy coming into the story, and that's obviously what they're doing with the movie. And I was just like, and I like that it wasn't like she just was always like always surprised, always bewildered. She kind of picks up stuff quick. And in like the Hellboy movie, they basically created a character that couldn't live up to the rest of those characters. So I would be interested to play, because every movie does that. Hey, we're introducing this so they can be our eyes as, oh, what if we got thrown into, we found out that we were immortals and we got to hang out with these cool people and got guns. So that's why I think it also needed something else. But that's my review of it. And, I'm going to let it go because, in reading it now, I think we were more jokey on our first review.
This comic, like I said, I read this comic and I was like, whoa, this is pretty. At first, the first look at it is like, what the hell is this? The colors are dark. The shading is off. The colors are off. The shading is like weird. They're taking pictures of people's bottom, or they're taking them from a far away look. But then as you start reading the story, you start getting into it. We're like, wow, the silhouettes are really cool. The dark shadows are good. And it also shows us a lot about the characters themselves, because none of them are perfect people, especially our main character, Andy, who is not someone that we necessarily would like. She's not the perfect hero where she's like, oh, let's always do the right thing. She said many times in the story things, let's not do something. And they're like, yo, but that's not the right way to do it, Mm-hmm. And you're like, oh, she drinks, she sleeps around, She doesn't seem, what ends up happening is she has a connection to this group. This is her family, in and of itself. And that's where you start finding out, well, you know what? This is what matters the most. Those who I am connected with, those who I feel secure. And even then, there are consequences for being in that family. So I think I liked it. And that whole relationship was pretty good. The only thing, I can't tell a joke, but I thought it was pretty good.
Oh, come on! That's what you're ending on.
Hey, you want to start off with some jokey, ended with jokey. Why even end it with jokey?
I'm not ending it with jokey. I was just saying that the review was, or we did another review. I want you guys to look at our other one and assess where it was at. Are we just saying, hey, it made Hollywood? We're now.
Look, I think if we're going to do this, I thought we were doing just a review of the comics and just saying how it's going to impact the story. If we're talking about, if we want to just do a straight review of the comic, call it that's it, nothing else, or do we want to say, bring in all this other stuff which we brought in, which is not necessarily bad.
What other stuff did I bring in?
Not you. I'm saying me. I brought in Highlander.
No, I'm okay with that because it has Highlander in the comic.
I was going to say Twilight, but I didn't. I don't want people to label me Robert Pattinson lover or something like that. But yeah, I'm just bringing in those things here that we're talking about.
So I mean, once we get to this point and we know what it is, we're gonna come back to you, and then we're gonna do another review, which is gonna be ready, set. It's going to be The Old Guard, Chapter 2, Force Multiplied. And now on this cover, we got the two ladies together.
Two ladies together. Again, with the heads cut off again.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
Yeah. It's like we're looking up at them. It's like you're taking the picture from the upside, as opposed to looking like most normal comics. You look straight in like a straight photograph. You're looking up instead. It's a photographic technique. And the artist using it is good. And in the color, you see how the dark shades, you still have Andy, because, she has a little bit of darkness in her. You see how darkly shaded it is. And then you have Nile in front. And we see that she's a vibrant and the more, fresh person, has ideas of how to do different things. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's definite. It'll be, since I haven't seen any of this, it will see how far this artist has gone. Because he's really starting off. I've seen another artist, I think his name was Alberto Dos, or maybe Alberto Dose. I think he had this sort of similar style, but they both kind of borrow from, what's the name, from Hellboy, like that sort of thing where you sort of know you're kind of spotting a lot of blacks and stuff like that. So ultimately, I want to see how he grows over the years. But, now they have a property that hit. It's going to be a movie, and we will be back to review Force Multiplied. After the movie. After the movie comes out, we'll review that. We'll talk about the movie and give our assessment of the comic at the same time, so we can go to the spoilers. Yeah. But thank you for checking out our reviews on this. And